I mean, and what I see in my interactions in the world is that view is a major thing, and like if you're seen as someone who doesn't have a viewpoint on something, then you're either, you're uneducated, basically, or uninterested. And
Becky, let me tell you how seriously I don't have any views. I don't have any views.
In our culture.
Yes.
Not to have a view on something.
Yes, because it's by having a view that you assert the idea of self as something substantial.
Mm.
And see, this is the clever little trick that's being employed. It's by this that myself shall be known. Inherent in that is the acknowledgement that you can't prove that the self exists, because you have to identify it with something, which is not self. Yeah, it's like a view.
Like a view. Yeah.
And why? Because self-preservation is the most pressing and important need for beings. And that's why there's so much chaos in the world. That's why everything's polarising so much at the moment. It's never ending. Well, it is ending, but the way it comes to an end is not through the final, ultimate assertion of your view over everyone else's. That's totalitarianism. That's not freedom. It comes from the total giving up and surrendering of all views.
Because I suppose, there are people who could see people who practice Buddhism or learn from the Buddha as people who are sort of pacifist. Almost pathetic.
Well, it's
like the easy way out, not to take a view on something and not to stand up for something.
Yes. It's misunderstanding harmlessness. A lot of people will assume that compassion means, they equate compassion with agreeableness. So it's all about being nice and comfort. And they don't realise that sometimes compassion although yes, you strive to be harmless towards yourself and to others, to be adaptable and accepting of others. It's a diverse world with many different views and opinions, it's good not to be hard. It's good to have a soft, empathetic outlook. But compassion also includes firmness, clear parameters, a willingness to assert when asserting is the right response to a situation. And so that sense in which you have to be pacifist, you can't, you are not supposed to react, is an extreme. It's an extreme view, because there are if somebody doesn't have extreme views, if they don't, because with self-view comes a lot of brittleness. When people really they hold extreme views, they're so brittle. And yet somebody who doesn't have strong views is so adaptable and so flexible. When they don't have much self-concern, where they're not fixed to one point of view but can see many different points of view, they're so adaptable that they can see when a firm hand and clarity and strength are required. But they're not doing it out of fear, they're doing it out of compassion. A few years ago I had to tighten up on people doing retreats because people weren't signing up for retreats. And no one's going to get anywhere if you don't do retreats. So it was always a parameter of the place, and it just slackened off. So I just re-emphasised the parameter that everyone who comes along to the House of Inner Tranquillity does retreats. A few people left. How dare they speak to me like that, or whatever. But the people who remained were all people who went, yeah, I think, this is right. I really do have to do a retreat every year. And as a consequence, the group has grown with a culture where everyone knows retreats are an absolutely integral part of a spiritual training, and it works tremendously well. So what did I have to do? I had to say, well, I can't just be agreeable. If somebody hasn't put their name down, it's 18 months since they lasted, 2 years since they lasted a retreat, I'm going to have to talk to them, and that's not going to be agreeable for me, and it's not going to be agreeable for them.
Yeah.
But it had to be done. You know? So pacifism is an extreme, and it's an attempt to resolve the problem of suffering, but it just doesn't work. You just become a doormat. I mean, there's some occasions when non-violence, I think, is a very effective response to intolerance.
Yeah.
But so is drawing a line in the sand and saying, you don't cross. You know.
Because one situation I'm seeing now, I mean, particularly we've got, on Facebook, you can see everyone's views and opinions on things.
Yeah.
One thing I found quite interesting was after the Brexit vote, a lot of people who I knew who were, I suppose, spiritual people, they were meditators. They seemed very angry at the half of the country that had voted to exit.
Okay.
And were saying that they were basically racist. And I mean, I just couldn't get my head around this, because it just seemed to be exactly the same thing as racism, because it's divisive. But it's sort of cloaked under this, because it was all about immigration, we should be agreeable, we should accept people.
Respect diversity.
But by doing that, they were also attacking half the country.
Yeah, because views are divisive.
Yeah, okay.
By their very nature. Because what you're doing is you have the seamless whole of existence, and then you're saying, well, I want it to be like this. And the moment you say, I want life to be like this, everything which is not this is then divided off and becomes the other.
Yeah.
So all views divide by their very nature. All views. So you can retain a preference without... and it comes back to this attachment problem. It comes back to this self-preservation problem and trying to prove the existence of the self.
Yeah.
So the more you meditate on transience and unsatisfactoriness and non-self, the less attached you are to views, because the less self-concern there is. Because really, after the first path, people's political views are just... They might retain preferences, but they don't cling to views in political views, certainly in the same way, because they have seen that existence is coming together and passing away due to conditions, and nobody is in control. And life makes sense without anyone being in control. And from that, there is a recognition that politics, for instance, in this case, can never resolve the problem of suffering. And indeed, someone who has experience of their first fruition, so they have direct personal knowledge of the reality of Nibbana, so they know that indeed there is a cessation of suffering, and it's got nothing to do with whether the blue party or whether the red party are in the House of Commons. It's irrelevant. So it's hugely transformative in that way, that you are no longer reliant on those kind of ideologies for your sense of order, or for the sense in which we've got to do something about this problem of suffering. Or you're doing something about the problem of suffering, but you know it's not, you can't get there through external means.
yeah, you can still go out and help people.
Absolutely, of course you can, and you prefer to do that, and you may very well retain a preference for being in a large, European economic system or not.
Yeah.
Because meditators are not a unified, body of people all sharing the same kind of like life, in conventional sense, life values. Some people will be more conservative than liberal, and that's just the way it is. So there might be meditators who might really genuinely believe that, or just feel that sort of integration of different cultures might not necessarily be such a great idea, but they're not clinging to it.
Yeah.
They're not clinging to it as an idea that this defines me. I mean, a lot of the problem, of course, with all of that is that people believe that their national identity defines them, or the colour of their skin identifies them. And then you bring in the whole idea of things like rebirth and the law of action and result, and suddenly life becomes fair. It's in the absence of the understanding of those things that cause people to believe that life is unfair, and that the view structures are based on that perception that life's unfair. But the moment you see that actually what we're going through, what anyone is going through, is actually right for them, then again, that adherence to political belief and ideology and trying to make life right because it's perceived to be wrong, it just goes out the window.
Yeah.
Completely. What we do when we practice insight meditation is like you learn about the basic patterns, psychological patterns that go to make anybody up. It's like a meta level of understanding patterning, because you're watching it as it's unfolding. And what you get is an understanding of, for instance, like understanding that because people fall into the trap of believing themselves separate from the rest of the world, there is a division, and there is consequently a sense of dissatisfaction, because one is separated from one's true nature, caught up in this illusion of selfhood. So one has lost one's freedom, so one is oppressed. And one loses sight of how life actually works, and therefore makes unwarranted assumptions about the way life works, which then reinforces this sense that in somehow, shape or form, life is wrong, and we've got to do something to make it right. So there's the craving. So there's been the observation of the way life is. It's been rejected based on false premises and misunderstandings. That's led to this sense that everything is wrong, and now we have to do something to make it right. What can we do to make it right? So you create ideas, and then you put those ideas to the test, and then you get reflected back. What you actually get reflected back are your own assumptions. So if you believe that the world is oppressing you, and you act with that belief, what you'll get back are perceptions that reinforce this sense that you're being oppressed. So it just creates this loop, this samsara.
Is it self-validating?
Yeah.
In a way? Yeah.
Yes. And so you can see why people get more and more wound up, why they get a sense that they're enduring ever more greater levels of oppression in this and that, because they're not coming back to test their a priori assumptions about the true nature of reality, which is what meditators are doing. So the meditator, in the process of undertaking the training, starts to recognise themselves actually doing this sort of thing. They start to see it in themselves, and seeing that it only perpetuates their distress and their sense of, and their suffering, their real suffering. And the more that they let go of those ideas and those ideologies, the less they get these perceptions that are reinforcing them. Yeah.
Mm.
So whenever we crave for life to be a certain way, we become more aware of its opposite, not less aware. So, for instance, a completely different example.
Yeah.
If you're lonely
Mm.
and you crave for relationship, your craving for a relationship merely reinforces the sense of your loneliness.
Yeah.
So it's what we're doing as meditators is seeing the pattern, and you see that the pattern can be applied to so many things,
Mm.
and yeah, it's distressing.